guess, if I have to break it down into one single component. It always comes down to the people that you meet and that you interact with, you know?
That method is not working anymore, especially in places like Japan. So it was very amazing to meet Hazuma and then to connect with Fanie and Soil Searching and Hazuma was, that was a really cool time that we shared in Japan.
It really sounds like a real alignment of the stars that went on behind the scenes there.
Yes, it was cool.
So, Fanie, do you have any stories that you could share that are similar to the Hazuma story, and maybe the kinds of challenges that they've had, right, and how they overcame them?
Yeah, man. Well, Ben, like I can tell you now, it almost seems like, as you said earlier, you know, things just sort of aligned for us to go to Japan, and I almost feel like almost every person I meet around the world has got a unique story in some shape or form, you know, like Matt's guys in Kamloops, the trail builders over there, who I'm also supporting under Soil Searching. You know, like Matt and them are busy making a film of them. You know, those guys are almost on the complete opposite side of the spectrum as Hazuma in Japan, but their story is just as fascinating, just in a different way. I mean, what those guys did in Japan, in Kamloops, had a ripple effect all around the world in freeride mountain biking. But I'd say they're a little bit more rock and roll, you know, whereas Hazuma is more like classical music, Ludovico Einaudi, Beethoven, Mozart. You know, the guys in Kamloops is more Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, you know, setting guitars on fire on stage and that kind of thing. And I'm a big Jimi Hendrix fan, so I've got an appreciation for all genres. So that's the best way for me to explain it, is like all these different guys that I meet around the world are just artists in different genres and the way they express themselves. Some people do everything by the book, and that is almost like classical music. Like you have to do everything by the book, but then you get like these other guys that's just absolute freedom of expression and almost like abstract art. So if I have to get specific, I mean, you guys saw the latest, I don't know if you guys seen the latest Soil Searching story on Hilton in South Africa, but he was basically, to go back to the very beginning when I used to work for Specialized South Africa, he was basically the start of soil searching for me personally, because and we are actually busy making a different film about that, because that's a whole different story. But just to tell you guys, he used to be a local Specialized ambassador in South Africa, and we had a demo event in their area. And the one day I had to he was busy. He built a trail. He built like this whole trail for 3 months with his own hands. Like he had no machinery, nothing, just him and another guy built this entire trail. And we had to go out just to go help him put a little bridge in over this little creek crossing that takes you less than 2 seconds to cross. And that was my first time trail building. This was in 2010, I think, or 2009, around there. I went there, and that was my first time trail building. And that was the first moment in my life where I realized, holy shit, there's so much work that goes into trail building. And it hit me so much that from that day on, I was like super involved at the local level with Specialized South Africa in supporting trail builders and trail building. So Hilton was sort of the initial spark to what would eventually become a global soil searching movement. And like I said earlier, every single person that I've met around the world, every trail builder, every advocate, because, you know, some people aren't physically going out building the trails. They are in, you know, government offices, you know, writing letters, you know, doing talks at the local city halls. Every single person has got a similar story that, you know, is very, very unique. So, I mean, I can tell you crazy stories about so many people that I've met around the world, but that's basically where it started.
That's so cool, right? I mean, you know, I've listened to Bobby, obviously the market leader in South Africa, right? He's a big advocate of you know, the trails and trail development. How has Specialized in South Africa, you know, sort of taken that to the next level?
Yeah, Ben, that's a good question. I mean, in the beginning, it was pretty simple. South Africa is also a country that, like most mountain bikers, ride in lycra and they ride marathon races. I mean, South Africa has got incredible marathon races. So, the Epic is the most popular bicycle in South Africa. So, your typical trail rider, guys like us, is not a very common thing in South Africa. So, what Bobby did was he's like, well, we need more trails. Let's support our local trail builders. So that was basically the first step that he took, and that was the first time that I've heard of something like that, where a brand is actually supporting trail builders as ambassadors just because they build trails, not because they've got a massive Instagram following or because they go to races and they stand on the podium and get brand exposure, just because they're out there, creating our stoke. And most of the time, I think Matt would also agree with me. Most of the time, some of these trail builders are even better riders than the people who get sponsored. They just don't go out and compete. They don't go out and go to events because they're not concerned about that stuff. That's not why they do it. And a lot of the times, these trail builders are such humble, down to earth people, but they're not necessarily public figures. So that's why they don't always get the support, and their own bikes are falling apart. So that is basically the first step that Bobby took in South Africa, was to support the builders just with product, just to stoke them out, to say, hey man, listen, no questions asked. We give you guys, each one gets a bike for the year to ride, and get some kit, get some helmet and stuff, and then and that was already a massive step in the right direction. And then following through from that, Bobby actually got the trail builders out to the local area close to the office where a lot of the riding takes place, and he did some fundraising, some bike auctions and bike raffles, and contributed from Specializer's side to invest into the trails, and got the trail builders out to come and build there, and paid them to build the trails over there. And then other things like getting the media involved, and instead of getting the media to do an article on a cross-country athlete, the media would then do an article on the trail builder. And with all the press events and the product launches, he would always incorporate the trail builders into it, as ride guides or just something like. So there's all these small things that he did in South Africa that helped create some exposure for these guys.
That's so cool, right? I mean, especially hearing that slight cross-country focus to trail building, that's probably something that's very different from what's happening, where you live, Matt. So, Matt, so what's the kind of scene that's happening right now in where you are? And how is that different from what Fanie is describing right now?
The scene in my area right now is quite an active building scene, and we have some of our riding areas are legal, and some are just areas that are public land that aren't really sanctioned with signs and things. So people are building on all different kinds of trails right now. But because of COVID right now, a lot of building that's happening is not sanctioned building, but it's still people working on the trails that are there, and that's the story with the building locally right now. Yeah, mostly on descent type trails, but there's definitely some good cross country development happening too.
I know of someone on this call who has been doing some great work both on XC trails as well as enduro trails. Edri, do you want to share the work that you're doing right now?
Yes, hi guys. Here in the Philippines, especially here in my hometown in Tarlac, I was fortunate enough to be with a group of passionate riders that helped me build the trails. Because when I started riding here in Tarlac, we most of the riding are actually on paved roads, and then I got inspired with, of course, back in, I think I started in 2010, 2011, and I got to watch the videos, the collective, life cycles, and I got so inspired. Why don't we have trails like this? And I get to see the hills. I see there's lots of potential that we can do. But I started just me and one friend, and then it's not really building trails, but we go to these footpaths of mountain people on the people living in the hills and the mountains. They started as footpaths, and that's where their carabaos go, and it's usually double tracks, and it's very rough, just the way we like it. So we just started to connect all these dots. I go to Google Earth, and then I saw, especially in summertime, I get to see all those lines. All those lines I get to see. And one by one, we started to interconnect it. And then we started inviting fellow riders. Why not try trails? Uh, Come with us. And it sometimes there's just two reactions. One is they don't want to do it again. It's hard for them. And the second one is they're so stoked and let's go all every week and let's build more trails. So that's where it started, and now we're a group of around 50 to 100 guys. And when we organize dig days, 20 to 30 guys always show up. And one good thing is the local government, because one of the mayors here in Tarlac is actually an avid mountain bike rider, Christian Yap. He he got the local government to hire some local guys to trail build. They hire them as a regular employee. So as the riders, we just tell them, oh, let's do a path here and something, and then they build it. And one good thing is, at first they're just we always tell them tutorial, but now they already see it, because um as they go along, when we ride it and we show them the corrections and do this and do that. Right now we have around 80 to 100 kilometers of trails, um, always ready. And not just that, the local community, there are new stores, eateries, because all the bikers was always there. Many livelihoods started to come up because of the riding. So we wish that the local government will continue to support us, because um, of course it makes us happy that we can ride more trails, but also we get to help the local communities more. So we just hope to continue that, and hopefully we build trails also because we want to share it with our fellow riders. So hopefully soon you can all ride here in Tarlac and we get to enjoy the trails. Yeah.
That's super
That's very
awesome and
cool.
inspiring.
And
Yeah, I mean-
wicked story about how the momentum grew with you. That's a cool story, man. Thanks for that.
Edri, so that's super inspiring, right? I really love the part where you were saying that trail building is not only great for the riders, right? But it's also creating an ecosystem where even the people who are working on the trails, it becomes like a form of career, right? In those rural communities, right? And that's something that's really, really interesting, and something that, you know, a lot of trail builders around the world, and we see that in the videos, right? They're very hands-on, right? But this is a very interesting situation where you're creating employment opportunities, you're creating commercial opportunities around the trail, right? Fanie and Matt, do you see any such things happening around the world that are similar to this?
I could comment on that, because locally for me in the last 5 years, and in other places, I've seen it in other places around the world too, but I'd like to talk about what's happened in my town, because it's been such an amazing it seems like our community has just embraced trail building. We had a change in the designation of the body who controls our public land, and we've had a lot of open minds to trail building, and I've seen investment in trail, and the rewards are just like they're very amazing to see. the growing like tourism and Stoke and just the whole scene growing right now is just seems like the momentum's like crazy. And one thing that's interesting, I know that we have good mountain biking because we have a lot of terrain, but I feel like I've noticed a pattern in things that I see at home spreading around the world in later years. Like we had the first bike parks, and then bike parks started to pop up around all over the world, and now bike parks are huge. So it's an exciting time, and I feel like the future is really just having so much potential right now, and yeah, I'm stoked on it.